All right, folks. So let's do the second step in our shattered value drawing. So we originally started with a small image. I used a stencil to make my life a little bit easier. Then I also chose a spot where this fracture is going to happen. I used a ruler, drew the lines out to make what looked like pie wedges, and then broke those again. Now, I made the decision to keep these areas outside of my image really big, and then what's inside my image really small. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to add value to this, how we're going to finish it. So just as a reminder, right, when we look at our pencils, right, over here, there's a number, there's a letter in there. Our darkest pencil is going to be a 6B, 4B, 2B, so I'm getting toward where it says light here, 2H, okay? Now, are you going to use every single pencil doing this? Maybe not. I always show you how to do that so they understand what each of the pencils will do, but you don't necessarily have to use every single pencil every single time, okay? You may find a couple that you really, really like, and those are the ones you work with. So the whole premise of what we're going to do now is each of these little shapes and each of these big shapes is going to get filled in with a value scale. So it's going to go from dark to light. You can choose to either concentrate on your center figure. You can concentrate on the background. You can start in the middle and work your way out. You can start over here and work your way this way, wherever you want to start this. So just to demonstrate first, what I'm going to do is pick one of the bigger sections just so you understand what I'm talking about as far as light versus dark. And it might require that you have to turn the paper, right, to make stuff work. So I'm going to pick this really big section here, and I'm going to choose to put a dark value toward the middle, okay? So I'm going to use one of the darker pencils, a 6B, 4B, whichever one, makes you happy. And with that, those softer pencils, you shouldn't have to press really hard to make it have a dark mark. And if you go over what you've done more than once, you will definitely fill in anything that, kind of looks sketchy. Okay? I know some of you guys like to smudge. You like to mush everything with your finger. I would love to see people have better pencil control as opposed to just smudging. So I'm going to go to about here with this dark pencil. I'm using a 4B in this section. But if I didn't think that was dark enough, I could go back in here with my 6 and sort of darken this up a little bit if I wanted to. So see already the difference between a 6 and a 4? How much darker this already is. Okay? But what I want you to practice on this is your blending skills. Okay? So I want you to try to make me not be able to see where you've switched from one value to another. So I'm gonna then now grab my 2B pencil, which is the next one on the list. And I'm basically using the same pressure that I was before. But now I've got to make these two sections kind of look seamless, like they just sort of blend together. Okay, so I've gone in one direction. I'm going to make my life easier by turning the paper. Now I'm going to go in the other direction to sort of fill in whatever I missed. Not to mention the fact that when you put a second layer on, you've got a bit more graphite to work with. Okay. So I'm going to have to push a little bit harder when I go into where my 4B is to try to get that area to blend a little bit nicer. Okay. And then I'm going to head down here. Now I'm going to switch to my HB pencil. Just have to find it. 4B. Okay. So now I'm going to use my HB pencil. And if you remember from using these before, as you get into the pencils that have H next to them, H means hard, it's a little bit harder to blend them, right? They look more scratchy than anything, which is kind of tough. And again, I always think it's easier to turn the paper and go across what you're doing. Okay, so I'm just trying to fill in this section and get these guys to hang together. I don't like the fact that it still looks really scratchy, so I'm going to slow down a little bit and take my time and try to fill in where I left the scratchy marks so it looks a little bit more even. Okay, and then I'm going to grab my H pencil to go ahead and finish the last section of this. And that's going to be really scratchy. So you just have to be patient, honestly. Because what you definitely want to do is try to get rid of that line that's there. So we started off that way. I'm going to go ahead and turn my paper. Now I'm going to go this way. And try to fill that in. And see, I've already got it going from light to dark. But now I just want to neaten it up so that it blends a little bit better. Now, if you run into this issue where you can see the difference between the two, go back to the pencil that you had there, which for me was my HB pencil. And I'm going to try to add a little bit more to the HB here. I'm not going to press as hard as I did before, just to try to even out that line a little bit more. Okay? Now, the rule, we'll call it, that we're going to do is whatever happens here can't happen here. Okay? So if I used my darkest pencils here, then that means I want something very light next to it. And I do recommend when you work on this, work on a section and then do the section next to it. Like, don't skip. So I'm gonna hang here with my HB pencil. I'm gonna go ahead and put this part in next to the dark, because now I have to go opposite, right? I have to have light next to dark and then dark next to light, right? They've got to be opposite each other. And I will show you one trick. You can't do this if you start with dark, but if I start with a lighter pencil, I can nearly color the whole thing in. And then that way I already know that I kind of have a base of graphite. And I'll show you how we're going to adjust it for the steps so that we're doing that gradient. Now, you got to go around all your other shapes. So if you've got other shapes in here, what we're going to have to do is make sure that we skip those. Okay? So like I said, I'm going to color in nearly my whole area with my HB pencil, because it's my lightest pencil I'm going to use over here. I could have done the same thing with a 2H. Would have been totally fine. And I'll show you why this helps you so much more. Okay, so I've got HB. I've got my light next to my dark. Now I'm going to go in the other direction, and I'm going to start darkening things. And I think after you do the first couple of sections, it'll make a little bit more sense to you where you want to start. Like, do you like to start in the dark part and then try to get things to blend? Or would you rather start where it's lighter and darken everything? Okay, that's for you to figure out. That's your call. Now, we know we have to leave a section of this really light, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do my next layer of dark up a little bit. And my other thing too, whenever I'm trying to do this in blend, I'll color in a circle, okay, instead of just straight up and down. So if I kind of go here and I go circle, 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 my edges blended a little bit better. And then I'm going to add a little bit more up here, right? And this part was a lot darker, that was over on this side. So those two colors are okay with each other. And I am going to go ahead and do this part right in here. Okay. Now, whenever we're working with anything to do with value, we always say it's relative. And what we mean by that is that I only know that this is light enough because I have something here that's dark. If it's all by itself, you have no idea what's light and what's dark. So it's not until you put it next to something that you can say, oh yeah, that's much lighter. Okay, so now I'm switching to a 4B pencil. I have nothing to compare this to, so it's okay to just go ahead and make this nice and dark. I'm not going to break any of the rules of the project. Okay, and again, I'm doing round down here so that my 2B and my 4B hang out nicely together. I turn my paper to make my life a little easier because I have to go up against this straight edge. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to color in this whole section in 4B. I'm going to do the whole thing, just like I did the whole thing before in HB. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I'll tell you the truth, I kind of like going light to dark as opposed to dark to light. I think it's easier. It's easier to figure it out. I'm going to come back in here and do some circles to try to get this evened out a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to go back in here with my 6B right here at the edge, and I'm going to layer this on top of the 4B just so that this edge is nice and dark. Okay. And I'm not gonna make it come down too far, but because I already have the 4 under it, so much easier to blend this and not have a weird line. Okay, so now I've got light next to dark and dark to light, dark to light. So it's a nice value scale. So I think the next thing that I'm going to tackle is going to be this little niblet in here. I know it's inside my item, but it's right next door. So let's do this. So this right here is dark. So I'm going to get my lightest pencil, my H pencil. Okay. And again, I'm going to color in this whole thing. But we still want it to go dark to light. But it's such a small thing that I'm certainly not going to be able to use all 5 pencils. That's going to be crazy. I might only get to use a couple pencils. So I'm going to do... So that was my 2H pencil. So now I'm going to use my HB pencil. Okay. And I'm going to leave the tip of this light. I'm going to color from here up with HB. And then I'm going to very softly try to blend this edge. Okay. So I'm still light next to dark, light next to dark. But I still feel like we've got to have a dark edge up there. Otherwise it's going to look weird. So I'm going to take my 2B. And I'm just going to come in here so it just doesn't look like a weird line. And just kind of put a little darker edge in here. But again, it's such a small section. It's kind of hard to use all the pencils. You can only use a few. Now, one thing that I noticed is see how close these guys kind of are? And this is the darker part. So I'm going to come back in here and just darken this a little bit so that those two things stand out from each other. And that's what I would expect you to do. I expect you to go back and make adjustments as you go. And once you notice that something kind of looks strange, be like, you know what? I need to darken that, or I need to lighten that. Okay? All right, so now we've got this little spot, dark to light. Now we got to make a decision. What should we work on next? We could do this big section. We could do this small section in here. I think I'm going to do this small section in here. So we're light here, which means this has got to be dark. So it's going to go dark to light down here. So using my advice that I just gave you, I'm going to start with an HB pencil. Okay. And I'm going to color in this whole thing with HB. So then that way there's some graphite down, because you guys that like to smudge, the only reason that the smudging works is because when you color like this, you're leaving some dust, some graphite on the paper. So that's what lets you smudge, because you notice that at some point you can't smudge anymore. That's because all the graphite's been mushed into the paper, and that's all you got. Okay? So this part actually has to be dark. So I'm going to work backwards. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make the light end be nice and blended, because I don't want to go back to it again. So that's my light. This was HB. So let's get our 2B pencil. Okay. And I'm going to start that up a little bit higher. So remember, this is our light side, so it's okay if we go nice and dark up here. And we want this to still be lighter. So I'm going to bring this down and then just sort of let it fade in. Turn my paper because it's easier, because I'm trying to go down a straight line. Okay. And again, yep, I'm coloring in the whole thing with my 2B pencil. Okay. But if I take a look at it, now I've only got two values, right? I've got a lighter one and a medium one. So let's go ahead and darken up the top. So I'm going to grab my 4B. And I'm actually going to start up here at the point. And I'm going to fill this in and make it nice and dark. And then my challenge is just going to be, how do I blend that so it doesn't look odd? Up here. Okay, so we don't leave any weird lines. Okay, so now we have a new little value scale that's dark here. Next to my light, I'm dark. And it goes down to light again. Okay, so you're going to continue this way. And like I said, I think the easiest way to do this is if you work on something and then go right next door to it. Like if I did these, I wouldn't go over here and do this one because I have nothing to relate it to. I'm like, well, if I do that, I really don't know how dark or how light I should be. It's not going to make a whole lot of sense. So I would work out from where you are, okay? I'm going to do one more section here. So right now I'm using my H pencil. I'm going to do this section because what's our solution here, right? We're light here, we're dark here, okay? Like I said, I like it when you kind of lay everything down first with a light pencil. Okay. So now we got to figure this out, right? So this is my dark end, so this has to stay light. So that means I'm going to work from here up. So that was my H pencil. So let's grab my HB. And I'm going to go ahead and add another value right here. And one thing I'll show you, it is okay if you color over the other piece that you did, because I'll show you how we make the edges look nice and crisp. All right, so I've got the blending from my H to my HB, and I'm going to keep going with HB all the way up here to the top. Okay. So after HB, we're going to use 2B. That's going to go right here. And please make sure, you're rotating your paper. It's going to make your life so much easier to color in whatever direction you want to work in. And going to my 4. So the challenge right here is that I know this edge is dark and we're kind of dark up here. We're going to do the best we can because that's kind of a funky intersection. Okay, but what I am going to do is I'm going to make sure that this edge over here up against those shapes has a really nice dark edge on it. But then I've got to kind of fade that out a little bit. So again, using my circles to come down here and fade it out. Now, I said to you we can make this edge look a little bit nicer. So with my 4B pencil, I'm actually just going to come in here and kind of like redraw the line. Redraw this line. Just so it looks a little bit neater. Okay? So, if we take a look at this, where we are right now, we're starting to build up all of these values, and I would recommend you use those techniques that I just told you about so that you can get a better idea of how to do the blending. Like I said, if you just switch from pencil to pencil to pencil, it's a lot harder to do. If you start with your lightest pencil and color the whole thing and then darken it, I think you're going to find you'll like the way the results turn out. All right. So once you get this started, you're going to submit to me, progress where you are, and then moving along, we'll kind of do check-ins and see where you are on this. Okay. Okay.